The coffee in my cup had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but I kept stirring it anyway, watching the cream swirl in lazy circles. Outside Murphy's Café, November rain drummed against the windows like impatient fingers. I was thinking about the 1967 Mustang waiting in my garage when Pierce Eldrow slid into the booth across from me. "Your wife's moving in with me tonight," he said, straightening his expensive tie. "There's nothing you can do about it." I looked up from my coffee, taking in his perfectly styled hair and that smug expression rich guys wear like a badge of honor. Pierce Eldrow, tech entrepreneur, country club member, the kind of man who probably had his shoes shined twice a week. "Did she pack the jewelry I bought her, or the pieces I inherited from my grandmother?" I asked, keeping my voice level. His grin faltered for just a second. "What?" "Simple question, Pierce. When Ember packed her bags, did she remember to take the diamond earrings I gave her for our anniversary? Or did she grab the antique necklace that belonged to my family for 3 generations? The confusion in his eyes told me everything. He didn't know Ember as well as he thought he did. Probably didn't even know she kept 2 separate jewelry boxes, or that she had a habit of losing expensive things when she was nervous. "Look, Tanner," he said, leaning forward like we were old friends having a heart-to-heart. "This doesn't have to be ugly. Ember's made her choice. She deserves better than a grease monkey who fixes cars for a living." I nodded slowly, as if considering his words. "You know what's funny about fixing cars, Pierce?" "What's that?" "You learn to spot the problems before they become disasters. Little things. A loose belt here, a cracked hose there. Most people ignore the warning signs until their engine seizes up on the highway." Pierce's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I caught Ember's name on the screen. My wife of 15 years, texting her boyfriend while he delivered her breakup message. Classy. "She's waiting for me," he said, standing up. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I watched him walk away, noting the way he moved like he owned every room he entered. The kind of confidence that comes from never having to fight for anything, never having to work with your hands, never having to wonder if you could afford groceries and the mortgage in the same month. The rain was coming down harder when I got home. The house felt different, emptier somehow, though I couldn't put my finger on what was missing. Ember's car wasn't in the driveway, but that wasn't unusual. She'd been working late more often recently, or at least that's what she'd been telling me. I wandered through the rooms, looking for signs of her departure. Her clothes were still in the closet, her toiletries still cluttered the bathroom counter. Either Pierce was lying, or Ember was planning to come back for her things when I wasn't around. That's when I found the phone, hidden behind a stack of sweaters in her closet, wrapped in an old scarf like some kind of treasure. A second phone I'd never seen before. My hands were steady as I powered it on, though my mind was racing through possibilities, none of them good. The messages loaded slowly, months of conversations scrolling past, pictures I definitely didn't want to see, plans made in explicit detail. And then, near the bottom, the message that made everything clear. "T doesn't suspect anything, moving in tonight like we planned, can't wait to be done with this charade." Pierce's response. "Pack light. We'll buy you new everything, better everything." I sat on the edge of our bed, holding the evidence of my wife's betrayal, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, exactly, not yet. More like the calm that comes before a storm when the air gets thick and everything goes quiet. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Through the bedroom window, I could see the Vexler's house next door. Martha Vexler was standing at her kitchen window, watching my house with the intensity of someone who'd made gossip her full-time job. When she saw me looking back, she didn't even pretend to turn away. My laptop was still open on the dresser, Ember's email account logged in from when she'd asked me to print something for her last week. I walked over, fingers hovering over the keyboard. With a few clicks, I changed her password, logged her out of all devices, and set up a new recovery email she didn't have access to. Then I looked directly into the laptop's camera and smiled. The Vexlers were going to have quite a story to tell the neighborhood tomorrow. The next morning brought lawyers and accusations I hadn't seen coming. Ember's attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Holbrook, called before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. "Mr. Jossman, my client is filing for emergency custody of your children and temporary exclusive use of the marital home," she said without preamble. "We have evidence of financial abuse and controlling behavior." I almost laughed. Financial abuse? I'm the one who pays the mortgage. Cutting off access to email accounts, monitoring her activities, creating a hostile environment. We have witnesses. The Vexlers. Of course they did. "When's the hearing?" I asked. "Tomorrow at 10. I'd suggest you get representation." The line went quiet, and I found myself staring at the phone like it might offer some explanation for how my life had turned upside down in less than 24 hours. Through the kitchen window, I could see Martha Vexler pruning her roses with unusual enthusiasm, probably already planning her testimony about what a terrible husband I was. My kids, Jake and Madison, were at their respective schools, blissfully unaware that their parents' marriage had imploded. Jake was 17, more interested in his girlfriend and his part-time job at the movie theater than family drama. Madison, 15, was the observant one. She'd been asking questions about why Mom was never home for dinner anymore. I called Ray Kowalski, my oldest friend and the closest thing to a brother I'd ever had. Ray had been a cop for 20 years before starting his own security company. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was him. "Jesus, Tanner," he said after I'd explained the situation. "Ember really went nuclear, didn't she?" "Apparently. Think you can help me figure out what I'm dealing with?" "Meet me at O'Malley's tonight, and bring that phone you found." O'Malley's bar occupied a corner lot downtown, the kind of place where working men went to complain about their bosses and watch sports on screens that had seen better days. Ray was already there when I arrived, nursing a beer and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Show me what you've got," he said. I handed him the phone. Ray scrolled through the messages, his expression getting darker with each screen. "This is bad, Tanner, but it's also evidence. The question is whether you want to fight dirty or try to take the high road." "What do you think?" "I think the high road is overrated." Ray flagged the bartender for another round. "Your wife's been planning this for months. The emergency custody filing, the abuse allegations, even getting the neighbors involved. This isn't spontaneous. It's calculated. So what do I do? First, get a lawyer. Second, document everything. Third, remember that Pierce Eldrow made this personal when he showed up at that cafe." I thought about Pierce's smug expression, the way he'd talked about Ember like she was a prize he'd won. "What did you have in mind?" Ray's grin was the kind that used to worry suspects during interrogations. "Pierce drives a Tesla, right? Real proud of that car?" "Yeah, why?" "Teslas are basically computers on wheels, very sophisticated, very connected, also very vulnerable to certain kinds of technical difficulties." The next evening, I was working late in my garage when Pierce's Tesla pulled into my driveway. Through the window, I watched him get out, straightening his jacket like he was preparing for a business meeting instead of a confrontation. "We need to talk," he said when I opened the side door. "Do we?" "Ember's upset about the email thing. You're making this harder than it needs to be." I wiped my hands on a shop rag, taking my time. "Pierce, you want to know what I do for a living? Really do?" "You fix cars." "I restore classic muscle cars, mostly for collectors, sometimes for movies. Last month, I worked on a 1970 Dodge Challenger that sold for $200,000. I gestured toward the Mustang. "That beauty there? She's worth more than most people's houses." Pierce glanced at the car, unimpressed. "What's your point?" "My point is that I understand machines, how they work, how they break, how to fix them when they do." I stepped closer. "I also understand people who think money makes them untouchable." "Are you threatening me?" "Just making conversation." I pulled out my phone and opened an app Ray had helped me install. You know what's interesting about Teslas? They're always connected to the internet, always updating, always communicating with the factory. Very convenient, unless someone knows how to access those communications. Pierce's confidence wavered. "What are you talking about?" I tapped the screen. Immediately, his Tesla's lights began flashing, the horn honking in a rhythmic pattern that echoed through the neighborhood. Pierce spun around, fumbling for his keys, but the car's doors remained locked. "Safety recall," I said conversationally. "Something about a software glitch affecting the locking mechanism. Could take hours to resolve." "You can't do this." "Actually, I can. See, when you register a Tesla, you agree to remote diagnostics and updates. Very convenient, unless you annoy someone who knows how to exploit that access." Pierce was pulling on the door handles now, his expensive suit getting wrinkled. The horn continued its obnoxious symphony, and I could see lights coming on in houses throughout the neighborhood. "Turn it off. In a minute." I walked over to my workbench and picked up a spray gun connected to an air compressor. "You know what this is, Pierce?" "A paint sprayer." "Automotive paint sprayer, specifically. I was just finishing a custom job on a motorcycle. Fluorescent pink. Very eye-catching color." Pierce's eyes widened. "You wouldn't?" "Probably not. But accidents happen in garages. Equipment malfunctions, safety protocols get overlooked." I tested the sprayer, sending a brief mist of pink paint into the air, especially when people show up uninvited and start making demands. The Tesla's horn stopped honking. Pierce immediately tried the door handle, but it remained locked. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to walk away from my house, away from my family, and away from my wife. You're going to find someone else to play house with, someone who doesn't come with 15 years of history and 2 kids who don't need to watch their mother destroy their family. Ember made her choice. Ember made a mistake. The question is whether you're smart enough to walk away before this gets worse. I raised the spray gun. Pierce dove behind a stack of tires, but I wasn't aiming for him. Instead, I painted a bright pink stripe down the side of his Tesla, from headlight to taillight. Oops, I said. Hand slipped. Pierce emerged from behind the tires, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You're insane. Maybe, but I'm also the guy who knows where you live, where you work, and what kind of car you drive. I'm the guy who can make your life very complicated if you don't start making better choices. I tapped my phone again. The Tesla's doors unlocked with a soft click. Pierce ran to his car, yanking the door open and diving inside. The engine started immediately, but as he backed out of the driveway, I could see him staring at the pink stripe in his side mirror. By morning, half the neighborhood had seen Pierce Eldrow's fluorescent pink Tesla driving through town. By noon, someone had posted a video on social media. By evening, Pierce had become the subject of jokes at every bar and coffee shop within 20 miles. But Ember's lawyer still called the next day. Mr. Jossman, my client is now alleging that you assaulted Mr. Eldrow at your residence last night. Really? What kind of assault? Vandalism, harassment, unlawful detention? I almost felt bad for Patricia Holbrook. She was just doing her job, representing a client who was feeding her increasingly ridiculous stories. Ms. Holbrook, I'd suggest your client check the security footage from my garage before making any formal accusations. Security footage? High-definition cameras, motion-activated with audio. Amazing what you can buy online these days. I'm sure the footage will show exactly what happened when Mr. Eldrow trespassed on my property. There was a long pause. We'll be in touch? The line went quiet again, and I found myself wondering how long this could continue before someone got seriously hurt. But then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know what Ember really did. Meet me at Riverside Park tonight. Midnight. Come alone. Kana. Kana Rallis, Ember's younger sister. The family wild card, the one who'd always been too smart for her own good and too honest for polite conversation. This was about to get much more complicated. Riverside Park after midnight was the kind of place where teenagers went to drink stolen beer, and adults went to make mistakes they'd regret in the morning. I found Kana sitting on a picnic table near the boat launch, smoking a cigarette and staring out at the water. You came, she said without turning around. Your text was pretty compelling. Kana Rallis had always been the prettier sister, the smarter sister, the one who should have had everything handed to her on a silver platter. Instead, she'd spent the last decade bouncing between jobs and relationships, never quite finding her place in the world. Ember thinks she's so clever, Kana said, flicking ash into the grass. Always has, even when we were kids. She'd steal my toys and then convince Mom that I'd given them to her willingly. What do you know, Kana? She turned to face me, and I could see the resemblance to Ember in her features, but where Ember had grown sharp and calculating over the years, Kana still had something soft around the edges. She didn't just cheat on you, Tanner. She's been stealing from you. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? $38,000 from your joint savings account, transferred in small amounts over the past 6 months to something called Eldrow Investment Solutions. Pierce's company? Pierce's scam. He's been running a cryptocurrency investment scheme, promising huge returns to people who don't know any better. Ember gave him almost $40,000 of your money. I sat down heavily on the bench across from her. $38,000. That was Jake's college fund, Madison's braces, the down payment on the garage expansion I'd been planning. How do you know all this? Kana pulled out her phone and played a recording. Ember's voice, slightly drunk, talking to someone at what sounded like a party. Tanner has no idea. He thinks I'm working late, but I'm actually watching Pierce double our money. By the time the divorce is final, I'll have enough to start over somewhere nice. Maybe California. Another voice, male. What if he finds out? He won't. Tanner's not smart enough to track financial records. He barely graduated high school. I closed my eyes, listening to my wife of 15 years dismiss me like I was some kind of inconvenience she'd outgrown. There's more, Kana said. She played another recording, this one featuring Martha Vexler's distinctive nasal voice. We'll say we heard shouting, maybe something breaking. Patricia says they just need reasonable doubt about his character. Ember's voice. Perfect. And you're sure Tom will back you up?
Tom does whatever I tell him. We've been planning this testimony for weeks.
They rehearsed it, I said, more to myself than to Kana. Every word. The abuse allegations, the controlling behavior, even the story about you monitoring her activities. All of it coordinated to make you look like the bad guy. I stood up and walked to the water's edge, trying to process what I'd just learned. Ember hadn't just betrayed me. She'd systematically planned my destruction? The emergency custody filing, the neighbor's testimony, even Pierce's visit to my garage, all part of a larger strategy to paint me as an unstable husband and father. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Kina was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because she did the same thing to me. What? 3 years ago, I was married to David Chen. Good man, worked for the state, steady job, steady life. We were trying to have kids. Kina's cigarette had burned down to her fingers, but she didn't seem to notice. Ember seduced him, not because she wanted him, but because she was jealous that I'd found something real before she did. The pieces were starting to fit together. Kina's sudden divorce, the way she'd disappeared from family gatherings for almost 2 years, the bitterness that seemed to follow her like a shadow. She destroyed my marriage for sport, Tanner, and now she's doing the same thing to yours, except this time she's making money on the deal. What do you want me to do about it? I want you to fight back, really fight back. Not just the amateur hour stuff with Pierce's car, though, that was pretty funny. Kina finally noticed her cigarette had burned out and flicked the butt into the water. I want you to destroy her the way she destroyed me. How? Ember's always been proud of her reputation. Perfect wife, successful career woman, pillar of the community. What do you think happens to that reputation when everyone finds out she's a thief and a liar? I thought about the upcoming custody hearing, about Jake and Madison having to choose sides in a war they didn't understand, about Pierce Eldrow counting my money while planning his future with my wife. What did you have in mind? Kina smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely happy. The Founders' Day Gala is next weekend. Biggest social event of the year, all the important people in town. Ember's been looking forward to it for months, planning to show up with Pierce and make their relationship official. So what if we made sure she got the attention she's been craving, just not the kind she was expecting? I drove home through empty streets, my mind racing with possibilities. Kina's plan was elegant in its simplicity, but it would require perfect timing and a level of public humiliation that would probably end Ember's career in this town. The question was whether I was ready to cross that line. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your house is being watched. 3 cars, rotating shifts. Someone's planning something big. Be careful. A friend. I pulled into my driveway and looked around. The street seemed normal. Quiet houses with dark windows, nothing obviously suspicious. But as I walked to my front door, I noticed a sedan parked at the far end of the block that I didn't recognize. Inside, the house felt different again. Not empty this time, but violated somehow. Little things were out of place. A drawer slightly open, magazines not quite stacked the way I'd left them, the coffee mug I'd washed that morning sitting in the sink with a faint lipstick stain. Ember had been here. I found the note on my pillow, written in her careful handwriting. We need to talk. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., Murphy's Café. Come alone, and maybe we can work this out without destroying each other. But it was the postscript that made my hands shake. I know about Kina. I know what she told you. Some secrets are more dangerous than others. Murphy's Café looked different at night, with most of the lights turned down and only a few customers scattered among the tables. Ember was waiting in the same booth where Pierce had delivered his ultimatum, but she looked older somehow, worn down by the stress of maintaining her double life. You came, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. Your note was pretty compelling. She'd ordered coffee for both of us, a gesture that might have seemed thoughtful if I didn't know she was probably trying to keep her hands busy. Ember had always been a fidgeter when she was nervous. I want to call this off, she said without preamble. Call what off? The custody fight, the lawyers, all of it. We can handle this like adults. I sipped my coffee, studying her face. 15 years of marriage had taught me to read her expressions, and right now she looked like someone who'd realized she was in over her head. What changed your mind? Pierce isn't who I thought he was. Really? The guy who showed up at my house to gloat about stealing my wife isn't a prince among men? I'm shocked, Ember flinched. Don't be cruel, Tanner. This is hard enough. Hard for who? You? Pierce? Or the kids who are about to watch their mother tear their family apart on the witness stand? That's not fair. Fair? I leaned forward, keeping my voice low but letting the anger show through. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about the $38,000 you gave to your boyfriend's investment scam. Let's talk about rehearsing testimony with the neighbors to make me look like an abusive husband. Let's talk about planning this whole thing for months while pretending to be concerned about our marriage. The color drained from her face. How did you know about the money, the recordings, the conspiracy with Martha Wexler? I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. Kane has been busy. Ember closed her eyes, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married, vulnerable and young and maybe a little scared. But when she opened them again, the mask was back in place. Keena's lying. Is she? Because I've got bank records that say otherwise. I've got audio recordings that say otherwise. I've got security footage of you breaking into our house yesterday that says otherwise. I didn't break in. It's my house too. Not anymore. As of this morning, I've filed for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. I've also reported the theft to the bank and requested a forensic audit of all our accounts. Ember's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. You can't do that. Actually, I can. See, while you were busy planning your new life with Pierce, I was talking to lawyers. Real lawyers, not the kind who file frivolous restraining orders based on rehearsed testimony. Patricia says, Patricia Holbrook is about to have a very bad week. Suborning perjury is a serious charge, especially when there's recorded evidence of the conspiracy. I stood up, leaving a $5 bill on the table for the coffee I hadn't finished. Wait, Ember said. We can work this out. I'll give the money back, call off the custody fight, whatever you want. What I want is for my kids to see their mother for who she really is before they have to learn it the hard way. Don't do this, Tanner, please. You already did it, Ember. I'm just making sure everyone knows. The Founders' Day Gala was held every November in the ballroom of the Riverside Inn, a restored Victorian hotel that served as the town's primary claim to historical significance. This year's theme was Celebrating Our Community, which struck me as particularly appropriate given what I had planned. I arrived alone, wearing the same suit I'd worn to Jake's graduation and Madison's confirmation. Nothing fancy, but clean and pressed and appropriate for the occasion. Ray was working security for the event, which meant I had an ally inside if things went sideways. Ember and Pierce made their entrance fashionably late. Her in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Him in a tuxedo that looked like it had been tailored specifically for the occasion. They worked the room like a political couple, shaking hands and making small talk with the kind of people who considered themselves the town's elite. I watched from the bar, nursing a beer and waiting for the right moment. The evening's program included dinner, dancing, and a series of speeches from local dignitaries. The mayor would speak, followed by the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and finally an open microphone for anyone who wanted to address the community. That's when I would make my move. You sure about this? Ray asked, appearing beside me with a concerned expression. Too late to back out now. It's never too late. You could just take the high road, let the lawyers handle everything. I thought about Jake and Madison, probably at home doing homework and wondering why their parents couldn't be in the same room anymore. I thought about the $38,000 that was supposed to secure their future. I thought about Pierce Eldrow's smug expression and Martha Wexler's rehearsed testimony and Ember's careful plan to destroy my reputation. The high road is overrated, I said, echoing Ray's words from our conversation at O'Malley's. The speeches were as boring as expected, full of platitudes about community spirit and shared values. I barely listened, focused instead on the wireless microphone system Ray had helped me access earlier. Modern audio equipment was surprisingly vulnerable to the right kind of technical interference, especially when you had someone with security clearance helping with the setup. When Mayor Davidson opened the floor for community comments, I was ready. Good evening, I said, walking to the podium with the confidence of someone who belonged there. For those who don't know me, I'm Tanner Jossman. I've lived in this town for 23 years, raised my children here, built my business here. I could see Ember at a table near the front, her face pale with growing realization. Pierce was leaning over to whisper something in her ear, but she wasn't listening. I want to talk tonight about trust, I continued. About the bonds that hold our community together, and what happens when those bonds are broken by people who think they're above the consequences of their actions. My phone was connected to the sound system now, thanks to Ray's technical expertise. With a tap of the screen, Ember's voice filled the ballroom. Tanner has no idea. He thinks I'm working late, but I'm actually watching Pierce double our money. By the time the divorce is final, I'll have enough to start over somewhere nice. The room went quiet. Every head turned toward Ember's table, where she was staring at me with an expression of pure horror. That's my wife, I said conversationally. Talking about stealing $38,000 from our children's college fund to invest in her boyfriend's cryptocurrency scam. Another tap, another recording. Martha Wexler's voice. We'll say we heard shouting, maybe something breaking. Patricia says they just need reasonable doubt about his character. And that's our neighbor, Martha Vexler, conspiring to commit perjury in family court. The murmur that ran through the crowd was like electricity. I could see people pulling out their phones, some recording, others probably texting the news to friends who weren't there. Pierce stood up, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment. "This is harassment. You can't—" "Actually, I can," I said, cutting him off. "See, everything you just heard was recorded in public places or obtained through legal discovery. No privacy laws were broken, no illegal surveillance was conducted. Just good old-fashioned evidence gathering." I played one more recording, this one featuring Pierce himself. "The beauty of cryptocurrency is that it's essentially unregulated. I can promise whatever returns I want, and by the time people realize it's not working out, I'll have moved the money offshore." Pierce sat down hard, like someone had cut his strings. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, looking directly at Ember. "Tomorrow morning, I'm filing criminal complaints for theft, fraud, and conspiracy. I'm also sending copies of all this evidence to the State Bar Association, the District Attorney's Office, and anyone else who might be interested in how certain people conduct their business in our community." The room was completely silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, frozen in place like actors who'd forgotten their lines. "But tonight," I continued, "I just wanted everyone to know who they're really dealing with. Because trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair." I walked away from the podium without looking back, but I could hear the explosion of conversation that erupted behind me. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone was buzzing with calls and messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Ray caught up with me at my truck. "Well, that was something. Think it worked?" "Brother, I think you just ended 3 careers and a marriage in about 10 minutes. If that's not working, I don't know what is." We were interrupted by the sound of screeching tires. Pierce's Tesla, now painted a more conventional color, I noticed, came racing out of the hotel parking lot and onto the main road. Through the windshield, I could see him talking frantically on his phone. "Think he's running?" Ray asked. "Probably calling his lawyer, or his accountant, or whoever helps rich guys disappear when their scams fall apart." But Pierce wasn't running away. He was running towards something, and 20 minutes later I found out what. The call came at 11:30, just as I was getting ready for bed. Pierce's voice slurred with alcohol and desperation. "You think you've won, you piece of trash? You think you can humiliate me in front of the whole town and just walk away?" "Pierce, you're drunk. Go home." "I am home. I'm sitting in my living room, looking at the security footage of you vandalizing my car, planning exactly how I'm going to destroy you." I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. "What are you talking about?" "Assault, harassment, stalking, defamation. By the time I'm done with you, you'll lose your house, your business, your kids, everything." "Pierce, meet me at Riverside Park in 1 hour, or I start making calls. Federal prosecutors, state investigators, everyone who might be interested in your little vigilante campaign." The line went quiet, and I found myself staring at the phone like it might offer some explanation for how a defeated man had suddenly found his second wind. I called Ray, but it went straight to voicemail. Probably still dealing with the aftermath at the hotel, or maybe just smart enough to stay out of whatever was about to happen. Riverside Park at midnight was even more deserted than it had been when I'd met Keena. I found Pierce sitting at the same picnic table, a bottle of expensive whiskey open beside him and his laptop displaying what looked like financial records. "You came," he said without looking up. "What do you want, Pierce?" "I want you to understand something." He turned the laptop toward me, showing a spreadsheet with columns of numbers. "That cryptocurrency fund you think is a scam? It's not. It's actually quite profitable when managed correctly." I looked at the numbers, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "These are fake." "No, they're not. They're real returns from real investments, managed through real cryptocurrency exchanges." Pierce took a long drink from the bottle. "The problem is that I've been skimming profits to fund my lifestyle, and now I can't cover the shortfall." "So you are running a scam?" "I'm running a business that got out of hand. There's a difference." "Not to the people you stole from." Pierce laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Stole from? Tanner, your wife gave me that money voluntarily. She knew exactly what she was doing. She thought she was investing in a legitimate fund. She thought she was getting rich quick so she could leave you without having to worry about money. Don't make her out to be some innocent victim." I sat down across from him, trying to understand what game he was playing. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to make a deal." Pierce closed the laptop and leaned forward, his eyes bright with alcohol and desperation. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to retract everything you said tonight. apologize publicly for the harassment and defamation, and drop all the criminal complaints. In exchange, I'll make sure your wife gets her money back, plus interest. And if I don't, then I disappear with everything, including the $2 million I've collected from other investors over the past year. Ember's $38,000 will be the least of anyone's worries. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a business proposition. Save your marriage, get your money back, and let everyone move on with their lives, or watch me destroy a dozen families when I vanish with their life savings. You're insane. I'm desperate. There's a difference. Pierce stood up, swaying slightly from the alcohol. You've got 24 hours to decide. After that, I'm gone, and everyone you humiliated tonight is going to blame you for what happens next. He walked toward his car, leaving the whiskey bottle on the table. But as he reached for the door handle, I called out, Pierce. He turned around, and I could see the fear behind his bravado. You made one mistake tonight. What's that? You assumed I care more about the money than I do about justice. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Immediately, Pierce's voice began playing from the speaker, our entire conversation recorded in perfect clarity. You recorded me? I recorded everything. The blackmail attempt, the admission that you've been stealing from investors, the threat to disappear with $2 million. All of it. Pierce's face went white. You can't use that. It's entrapment. Actually, it's evidence, and tomorrow morning it's going to be in the hands of every law enforcement agency in the state. He lunged toward me, but 15 years of working with heavy machinery had kept me in better shape than his gym membership had kept him. I sidestepped his clumsy attack, and he crashed into the picnic table, sending the whiskey bottle flying. This isn't over, he said, struggling to his feet. Yes, it is. Pierce stumbled to his car and drove away, weaving slightly as he navigated the empty streets. I watched his taillights disappear, then called 911 to report a drunk driver. The next morning brought a parade of law enforcement officers to my door. FBI agents interested in the cryptocurrency fraud, state police investigating the conspiracy charges, local detectives following up on the drunk driving report. By noon, Pierce Eldrow was in federal custody, and by evening, the story was leading the local news. Ember came to the house that night, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen her. It's over, she said simply. Yes, it is. Pierce is gone, the money's gone, my job is gone. Patricia dropped me as a client this morning. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I know you'll never forgive me, she continued. I know I destroyed everything we built together. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back 15 years of trust, Ember. I know. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. What happens now? I thought about Jake and Madison, about the house we'd bought together, about the life we'd planned before everything fell apart. Now you figure out how to live with what you've done, and I figure out how to explain to our kids why their mother chose a stranger over her own family. Ember left without another word, and I watched through the window as she drove away in her sister's car. The Vexler's house next door was dark, their testimony having earned them their own legal troubles. My phone buzzed with a text from Kana. Justice served? I typed back, Justice served. But as I sat in my empty house, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage and the echoes of 15 years of shared memories, I wondered if justice was worth the price we'd all paid to achieve it. The story would end here, with no redemption, no reconciliation, no neat resolution that tied up all the loose ends. Just the cold satisfaction of watching people face the consequences of their choices, and the hollow victory of being right about everything I'd suspected. Some fires burn everything down, leaving nothing but ash and regret. This was one of those fires.